Welcome to Life and Food with Chef Mimi, where the art of living meets the joy of cooking. In 2020, Mimi transformed her life through her culinary skills, creating macro-balanced meals that led to an astounding 85-pound weight loss. So join us as we delve into her secrets for leading an amazing life while still enjoying incredible food, here on Life and Food with Chef Mimi.
Well, happy Monday and welcome to the Life and Food with Chef Mimi podcast. Tonight, Mimi is going to be tackling one of the biggest elephants in the room concerning weight loss, and no, it's not me. We're talking about bariatric surgery. All right, so this is something that can actually become pretty controversial when you're talking about health and food and people getting healthy and losing weight. So what is your take on all of this?
I feel like my opinions have changed on it over time. I didn't realize how accessible it was, and I didn't realize what an excellent tool it could be. So I think initially when I would think about it, I would think about it as an absolute worst case, last ditch scenario for someone who had multiple hundreds of pounds to lose. That it was not something that was mainstream and something that would benefit someone who had a smaller amount of weight to lose. And just like most things that I've come across in my health and fitness journey, it's oftentimes me seeing something online or me observing a person who's going through a personal transformation. Watching some friends of mine online, having great success with Kim's program was a big push for me to invest in myself and look into her program and get started with a health and fitness journey that way. And then also watching some people online who were around my size, who watched what they ate and, were working out and doing all the right things, who ended up going the route of bariatric surgery is what kind of made me start to realize that it could be accessible to me as well. So, I think that some people look at it as the easy way to lose weight or the unhealthy way to lose weight. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I feel like everyone's entitled to their opinion. I will say that it has not been a magic bullet for me. It has certainly been a tool, and I'm utilizing that tool every day to the best of my ability. And even with, this fantastic tool, my body still fights me to lose weight no matter what I do. So I may look into more tools further down the road, and I make no apologies for that. This is my specific journey that I'm undertaking.
Do you think there's a lot of misinformation out there about this kind of a surgery? And, the fact that a lot of people do see it as this like quick fix, this is the way you cheat. Does it seem to you like people are going into this with the wrong impression?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily that there's like misinformation out there or I don't think that unless you're inside of it and you're prepping for it or you're going through it or you're post-surgery, I don't think that you really realize how much of a focus is put on the emotional aspect of things and the, habit changes that need to happen. I think, where it pops up is, you see a transformation video of someone who's just absolutely massive and they've lost 300 pounds and then it's, they're like, I had surgery. It really is very different than that. I think that people see the largest, I don't want to say the largest case scenarios, but the largest and most dramatic transformations. And that is honestly that was my preconceived notion, was just that it wasn't for me. It wasn't for someone like me who was having success with, diet and exercise, although not as much success as I would have liked and really like stalling out and struggling to get past plateaus. But it wasn't accessible for me as someone who was kind of like a big person, but not a huge person, because I had only ever seen the stories of it and the videos of it popping up where it was someone who had lost a huge amount of weight, more than I even weighed myself, at my highest. So I don't necessarily think, I wouldn't say misinformation. I just think that what's filtered through to the public, to the general public, or what's filtered through to what you might see on Facebook is the absolute sort of largest examples of it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back in the day, I'm going to show how old I am here by remembering the day that Oprah Winfrey came out and revealed that she had lost a ton of weight and she had done this liquid diet to make it happen. And for that time, I think it was sort of the same thing. And I think that with shows like The Biggest Loser and other, marketed almost entertainment, concerning this, I think that it's sort of taken on that aura. That's sort of the perception when people think about, bariatric surgery. They think about these people who are so heavy they're confined to wheelchairs,
right.
And they have to be brought in with a forklift, and I'm not exaggerating.
Right. No, there's that show. I think it's called My 800-Pound Life, or
Yes.
something like that. And so, yeah. I mean, I think for me, I remember, gosh, it was a long time ago, before children, and we may not even have been married yet, but I remember going with you to an informational session that they had at St. Elizabeth Weight Loss Center about bariatric surgery. And I remember just feeling like it was not for me. It just did not feel right, or I don't know. I don't remember having a very positive interaction with that. And I will say what really changed my mind was seeing people that I knew going through it, and seeing, number one, the process, and seeing people that looked like me doing it. Number two, seeing that it wasn't crazy and dramatic, because I didn't want that. I didn't want something where I was going to lose 80 pounds in 2 months, and something insane where it was unsustainable or unhealthy, or so that I would be so nutrient deficient that, I couldn't live an active lifestyle from then on. So, I was watching these people that I knew, that I had dieted with and exercised with, and, who were really in the same boat as me, go and have these procedures and then come out of it saying, like, okay, I'm still watching what I eat. I'm still a healthy eater. I'm still tracking my macros. I'm still doing this, but I'm still going to the gym. I'm still working out. They were just having more success with those things that they were doing.
Well, what was that moment where you just felt like it was the turning point where you decided that you were going to actually do this?
I talked about this in one of the first sets of podcasts. And it was after I had my last baby. I had hit pretty much my lowest weight. I had a horrible pregnancy. I was very sick. I was very calorie restricted. And I had hit this low. And I popped the baby out and started breastfeeding. And almost instantly, the weight just started coming back on. I mean, just at an unbelievable rate. 5 pounds a week, and if I cut back my eating, then my milk supply would start to get wonky. And it was just, I just started seeing all of that work being undone. And I got back in the gym. I got back on personal training. I was counting my macros. I was logging all my food. I was doing all the right things. And hormonally for me, in a breastfeeding cycle, that's just my body is like it's starvation during pregnancy and then puts the weight back on during breastfeeding. It's happened with every single one of my babies. And so here I had achieved this new low.
Right.
And it was just coming back on, and it was coming back on so fast. And no matter what I was doing, it was just horrifying. It was just this demoralizing feeling, like I couldn't believe this was happening.
Kind of a nightmare for someone who's worked so hard to lose so much weight.
Exactly. And I think It was sort of the culmination of that happening. And then, like I said, watching this group of people that I had kind of just been checking in on and looking at their progress. And I reached out to one of them. I think it was actually before I even came to you to talk to you about it, but I reached out to one of them and said, like, hey, can you just tell me a little bit about your process? Like, what led you to this? Why did you decide? Where did you go? You know, what advice do you have for me if I'm considering something like this? And she was fantastic and just said, like, yes, sure. I've been dieting and exercising my whole life, and I could never get down past this specific weight, and it just didn't matter how hard I pushed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're describing my life, And she was like, I had a great experience. I went through this specific office. You can just call them and have a consult, And so that was kind of the first step. And I remember it was really hard for me to say it out loud to you. It was a little bit sort of like that realization, like that I wanted to stop drinking, that I really felt like I was developing a problem with alcohol, and how hard it was to just come to you and say, like, oh, okay, I need help with this.
I'm developing a problem with breastfeeding.
Well, I mean, I've always had that problem. But, I think it was sort of that same thing of like coming in and saying to you, like, hey, I want to do a really big change in my life.
I got to admit, I was put on my back foot by that. That was the last thing at that. I don't know if it was just that moment, in the day, or in the whole overarching process. But, I just remember that, like, when you said, I'd like to talk about this, I was just like, wait, what? Like, it really, like, took me by surprise.
Well, leave it to me to throw a grenade in the middle of things. But I really felt like I was at a point where I was doing everything I could on my own, and I was just getting so frustrated. And I thought, you know what? It's time for a new tool. It's time for a new approach, and I'm going to just see how this goes.
Yeah, I guess a big part of the surprise for me was that I honestly felt like at that point that you would be someone who was, pretty dead set against it, because, you had, undertaken a loss of weight that a lot of people have been unable to do without surgery, and founded a business based around healthy eating and, working out and taking care of yourself. And so when you came to me and said, I think I want to get bariatric surgery, it surprised me, because it felt like maybe it ran a little bit contrary to your ethos. But when you talked about it for a while, I realized I saw it from your perspective on it. But I think, I think a lot of people could feel like that, it's contradictory, that, here you are, you've got this business where you make healthy food for other people, you're trying to inspire people, you're working out, and then to say, well, I also had bariatric surgery.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I could see how at first blush, or like at initial glance, it could look contradictory, but I would say I still eat the same food that I'm prepping. I mean, that our fridge is full of my meals right now.
Mm-hmm.
I bring home protein by the pound every week, and that's what I live on.
Oh, yeah.
I just eat less of it now, and I still exercise. I actually exercise more now. I think it depends on mindset, and I think the problem with any tool is that, even like, the injectable drugs are super big right now, Ozempic, right. Wegovy, and I know a lot of people who are using them. Like, this is really big right now, and I know people that are using them along with a healthy diet and exercise, and I know people that are using them and they have not changed their lifestyle one bit. Mm. And you can kind of see, because you can see as their body shape changes as they're losing weight, those that are almost looking sort of wasted away,
right? Because
there's muscle loss there, and those that are sort of maintaining that muscle strength while they're losing fat. So I think with all things, it depends on your mindset going in. I think for some people, they look at bariatric surgery as I'm going to go in and do this. I will change absolutely nothing about myself. I'm just going to go in and have this procedure done. This is going to fix all of my problems, and I'm just going to sit back. I'm not going to make any other changes, and I'll lose weight and I'll be healthy.
Right. A magic bullet.
Right. And so for me, I would say that, what I ate, how I ate, when I ate, how much I exercised, if that was as important before as like a 7 on a 10 scale, after bariatric surgery, it's a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I remember leading up to it, you had to go through a lot of counseling. Can you kind of walk us through that? How did they prep you for the changes that were going to have to happen in your life?
Sure. I mean, I think there's only so much that a doctor's office can do. And obviously, it depends on your insurance. So certain insurance programs may require you to enroll in a program that they have where you speak to a coach or a nurse through your insurance company for a specific amount of time. You may have to have, weigh-ins and appointments with nutritionists at the doctor's office however many months in a row before you can qualify for surgery. Most insurance companies will require you to complete a psych eval with a licensed psychologist in the office or in another office. So it's not as easy as just going in and being like, hey, I want to schedule some surgery for next week. Here's my money. There is a barrier to entry. It's kind of crazy to say it, but my biggest barrier to entry, I could not even make the appointment until I rectified it, but my BMI was not high enough to qualify when I first started looking into it.
Wow.
It did not end up being a problem because I was breastfeeding, and within a month or so of me putting all my ducks in a row and doing the pre-insurance and everything and getting all of that set, I was just at that BMI level. But I had to be very careful to maintain it as I went through all of I think I had to do 3 nutritional visits. I had to do a psych eval. I had to do a couple visits with a nurse practitioner. I had to speak with a bariatric surgery nurse through my insurance company a couple different times. I mean, there was a lot. I was juggling a lot of appointments and a lot of things and a lot of different weigh-ins. And I had to be very careful because I couldn't go above a certain weight and I couldn't go below a certain weight before the initial green light for surgery. Mm-hmm. Once, during the pre-surgical diet, then I was able to lose as much as, as they want you to lose as much as possible. But that weigh-in before the green light for surgery, I had to make sure I didn't drop too low because it would disqualify me if my BMI was too low.
Right.
So I really was right on the edge there.
Yeah. You mentioned the pre-surgery diet. Let's walk through that a bit.
Okay. So it's generally a very restrictive, a very calorie restrictive diet. And they will require you, based on your BMI, based on what type of procedure you're having. It might be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. For people that are very, very large, it could be up to 4 or 5 weeks. And the main goal of this is to shrink your liver and to get rid of as much intra-abdominal fat as possible, as quickly as possible, so that when they go in to do the surgery, there's much less of a risk of them nicking something or, having any sort of complications during the surgery. So I think it's 600 to 800 calories a day. It's very, very low.
I would die. I would die.
I'm not gonna lie. This was a very, I talk about it sort of in a way now, like, oh yeah, I did this thing and it happened, and it was intensely difficult. The entire process, start to finish, and still can be very difficult, and that was a big part of it. It's funny because I would always see dips in my supply when I was breastfeeding, when I would restrict calories. And so one of the things that was very difficult for me, but one of the things that I decided was that I was going to just wean my baby and be done breastfeeding. And he had a lot of other ideas. He didn't like taking a bottle.
Nope.
So I thought, I'm just going to breastfeed, and pretty soon my milk will dry up, and then he will have no other choice. But I'm doing this for my own mental health. I'm doing this for myself, and I feel like I have to do it, and so that's just what's going to happen.
Whether you're an athlete, health-conscious foodie, or on a mission to shed those extra pounds, Mimi's Macros has got your back. Savor the taste of success with our delicious macro-balanced meals. Plus, there are no subscriptions and no minimums. Visit mimismacros.com to check delivery availability in your area. Mimi's Macros. Let us do the cooking, you focus on life.
So I went on this really reduced calorie diet. I had to do 2 weeks. It was a lot of liquids, not a lot of actual real food. It was very difficult. It was very difficult working in a kitchen where I make food and we eat food and we're tasting things, and I couldn't taste things.
Wow.
I would put it in my mouth to taste for seasoning and spit it out.
Yeah,
it was very, very difficult. But I ended up maintaining my supply through that, which was kind of incredible. The most incredible part, I think, of this whole journey is that I went through the pre-op diet, and then the surgery, and then the post-op diet, which is even more restrictive than the pre-op diet. And I never lost my milk supply, and I just kept nursing until after Timmy was, he was like 14, 15 months when he finally weaned on his own. So it's just kind of funny, but I was so prepared to give that up, for what for my goals, and then I didn't end up needing to. But, so you had talked about like what I had to go through. Lots of counseling, lots of talking about, healthy eating and making sustainable changes. I was a little bit of a model patient because I was already there.
Right.
They would talk to me about like, okay, do you know what a macro is?
And you're like, let me tell you about a little something called Mimi's Macros.
Right. So it's funny now. I even will talk to my nutritionist and she'll be like, so, do you know off the top of your head, sometimes it's a different nutritionist. They have a whole office full of them, so you don't always get the same person. Do you know off the top of your head about how many grams of protein you're getting a day? And I'm like, well, my goal is 120, and then my goal is 110 grams of carbs, and then my goal is 60 grams of fat. Now, I don't always hit that. What I'm usually hitting is like, try somewhere around 100 grams of protein, but it depends on, if I'm doing strength training that day. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're fine. No, yeah, that sounds great. Okay, honey, because you have to figure that, just like I'm coming in there, like I already know what this is. It's a tool. I'm going to use it. I'm at the gym every day. There's people coming in and they are not,
they're clueless.
They have major emotional eating issues, binge eating disorders, and, stuff that, they're starting from scratch, and so I did have to participate in these classes and in these meetings and in these evaluations and everything. But I found it pretty easy because I already knew what I needed to do to be successful with this.
And so then the day comes.
Right.
And I remember you being like, you're going to take me up there, you're going to drop me off, and then you're going to come back for me later. And I was like, yes, ma'am. Okay, I guess that's what we're doing. And then I realized later that it was just because, like, it had taken a long time for you to sort of screw up your courage to do this. And so you just wanted to be like make this as little a deal out of it as possible. And the joke was always that, you were always telling everybody like, oh yeah, I'm going to be back at work in a couple of days. And they're like, oh honey, no, you won't.
To be fair, I'm pretty sure I was back at work that next
weekend. You were, but you were miserable.
I will say, I've had multiple surgeries in my life. I had a gallbladder surgery and they missed some stones, and the stones got stuck in my bile duct, and it's called biliary colic, and they had to do a procedure where they put me under and they went down a tube down my throat to sweep the stones out. I had 3 C-sections. One was an emergency, like crash C-section, and then 2 planned. I've been through a lot, and I will say that this was 100% the hardest. This was a very difficult surgery. It was a lot more difficult. I don't want to say anything too awful about it, because if there's someone out there listening, I do feel like this can be really life-changing for people, and I don't want to discourage them. but it was a lot more painful than I thought it would be. The lead up to it was a lot harder, and coming out of it was very difficult and very painful for at least the first 3 to 5 days. And then you're starving because at this point you've been in a serious calorie deficit for 2 weeks prior, and then you have the surgery and you're basically just on fluids for a few days. And then you have to start adding in like a little bit of puree, and you take 2 or 3 bites and you can't eat anything else, but you're still very hungry, so that it's mentally difficult, and it was physically difficult.
So people who are thinking about doing this, they have to understand that this is not I'm going to go in one day and come back out and then things are going to be different. Like there's going to be weeks leading up to this. It's going to be difficult to get ready for it. It's going to be difficult to get through it, and then it's going to be difficult afterwards. It's more like a 2-month long sort of thing.
Oh, sure. I mean, I would go as far as to say that it's like a 6-month long thing. But I would also say I would go back. As hard as it was, I would do it again. I'm glad that I did it. I think that it was worth it for me. And, it allowed me to break through like one of my biggest plateaus that I was just always kind of skating around in this one weight range. And this really did allow me to break through that. Now I've reached a new plateau, and it doesn't seem to matter how hard I dial in my nutrition and my, workouts and everything else. And I'm struggling to break through that. So if another tool comes along that I look at it and think like, man, maybe that can help me, get down the next 20 pounds, then I'm going to use it. And people can, anyone can sit outside of anyone else's life and look in and say like, well, I don't know if I would have done it that way. Well, how can she say this when, I can post my reels of being in the gym every day because I'm in the gym every day. And I can post my reels about healthy eating because I'm eating healthy every day. It just makes it a little bit harder now to juggle my nutrition and my workouts and how I fuel my body, because I can't eat as much in one sitting as I could before. But that doesn't mean that my caloric needs have changed with working out, or my protein needs have changed. If anything, my protein needs have increased.
Right.
But it's a lot harder to get that protein in. I mean, you saw me tonight. I came home from the gym, and I had a specific amount of beef that I wanted to eat. And I even said to you, boy, I hope I can eat all this.
Right.
Because I just burned 600 calories. Like, that was my workout tonight. I burned 600 calories. And I was lifting, massive weights tonight. I was moving really heavy weight and running. And I could have very easily, pre-surgery days, come home and smashed a 600-calorie meal.
Right.
8 ounces of chicken breast just down the hatch. And I can't do that now. So then I have to be really, really intentional of what am I eating right before I go to the gym? What am I eating right when I come out of the gym? If I eat right when I come out of the gym and it's this many grams of protein, can I get a protein shake in before bed too? So that I'm really making sure that my body's not just going to eat that muscle that I just made overnight while I'm sleeping. So, anyone can look at it and say, quick fix. And sure, I'm a part of several different support groups, and I see these stories all the time. There's transfer addiction, so a lot of people have food addictions. They have the surgery, so then they're not able to eat like they want to eat, and so they have a transference of their addiction to alcohol, to shopping, to something else.
Gambling.
Right. They have an addictive personality. They're not dealing with the underlying issue, and then it's not fixed, and so the food portion gets turned off and they just turn on another portion. Mm-hmm. There's also a ton of people who, you feel like the coaching is so clear, and you have these, I'm almost a year out, and I still am having regular doctor's appointments, blood work. I'm meeting with nutritionists monthly. I'm meeting with a nurse practitioner every 3 months. Like, I'm having these regular check-ins where we're talking about all of the nutritional goals and everything. And still, I'll be on I'll be on one of the support groups and someone will say, does this look like an okay breakfast? And it's an orange, a kiwi, 8 strawberries, grapes, and I mean, it's a plate of sugar. Yes,
Yeah.
it's fruit, but it's a plate of sugar and you're a bariatric patient. Like, and you go to the comments and everyone's like, oh, honey, do you have protein? Is this after? Did you eat some protein? Can you put an egg on that plate?
Yeah.
So, you see these people in these support groups, and I think, unfortunately, those are the people that when the general public thinks about bariatric surgery, they think about those people that have it done. They don't change any of their eating habits, or they don't understand what real healthy eating is. They think like, well, I'll just eat fruits. I like fruit. I'll just eat a bunch of fruit. But they're not focusing on their protein goals. They're not focusing on their fluid goals. They're not incorporating exercise, in any way. So, I see that a lot in these support groups, and I see a lot of people in these support groups who have, lost 200 pounds or 150 pounds, 100 pounds, and then gained back most of it.
Yep.
And they're just saying, like, what do I do now? What do I do now?
Right.
And, so that's why I tend to not hang out in those support groups too much, because I don't feel like it's really indicative of the type of person that I am, and the way I approached the surgery, and the way that I live it out in my life. So I'm a member of a different group, and it's called Bariatric Gym Rats, and it's basically people that have bariatric surgery and now are obsessed with exercising and eating right and living in the gym. And those are my people that, we compare stats.
Yeah, I remember that's actually the reason why they canceled The Biggest Loser, was because all of the people that were winning were actually gaining all the weight back later. And I remember they interviewed one guy because they went back to try and help him, and he said, I know how to be a fat guy, and I know how to take all the weight off, but I don't know how to maintain. I have no idea how to maintain my weight. And they realized that they weren't teaching people those skills.
Yeah, I mean, it makes for great TV, but, anything that you pick that's unsustainable, it's unsustainable, and for me, I feel like I've worked really hard to build up my tolerance to food. I know there's a lot of people, in the support groups where they're 6 months out and they're like, well, I can only eat 1 ounce of chicken at a time. And it's kind of like the brag. Oh, I could never eat all that. Oh, I can barely muscle down this tiny little portion. And I'm like, well, good for you, but I just went to the gym and burned 600 calories. I've got to get some protein in, So for me, that was one of the things that I started immediately, as I moved through the phases after the surgery. You're very swollen, and so there's only so much you can fit in your stomach. But then obviously as you heal, you can't really that's kind of the misconception, is like you re-stretch out your stomach. You really can't, but you can figure out, they call them slider foods, which are like foods you can eat really easily, and they don't, they just kind of go through fast. It's a lot of unhealthy foods, so, I mean, you can still eat a ho-ho, and, you might have eaten the whole box before, and now you can only eat 3 of them, but if you're still eating ho-hos, you haven't changed the issues, that you had before the surgery. So for me, as I started moving through the phases, the puree phase and the soft food stage, and into, and building back up, one of the things that I focused on was super high protein, and trying to get my body to be taking in as much protein as possible. And I'm glad of that. I probably can eat, a bit more than maybe a standard bariatric patient, but I'm okay with that. The goal of this was never to make it so that I could barely survive and just, eat tiny little, morsels of food here and there. I don't have the kind of lifestyle that works for.
Right.
I am an active person from morning to night. I am up and down and moving, and I'm constantly doing. And then on top of that, after my very active day, after moving around a whole bunch, then I'm going to the gym, or I'm starting my day at 5 a.m. going to the gym and, burning a ton of calories, building a ton of muscle right off the bat, or at the end of the day. So that was one of my things. that I knew going into it was that I didn't want to come out on the other side with this idea of I'm going to consume as little as possible.
Right.
For me, it was more of a hormone issue of, part of when they remove that portion of your stomach, a lot of it, the hunger hormones and a lot of the other hormones, are basically cut out or stop or limit in production. And I feel like that honestly has been more effective than just the restriction of calories. Because I can't restrict too much because I can't work out. And if I can't work out, what is the point of this? Because I'm not trying to do this to be the skinniest person there ever was. I'm trying to do this so that I'm healthy and I'm fit.
So let's circle this all the way back then, because the main takeaway I'm seeing here is that bariatric surgery has to be seen as just one battle in a long war, and you've got to have a plan. So for the people out there who could be thinking about bariatric surgery, how would you what would that plan look like? Would you say you got to start by changing your eating habits, or first you got to start by exercising? Where does it fit in? What would be the smart way to do this so that they could fit it in at the right point, and when they got there, they would be prepared for it?
Sure. Well, I think you said it just then. You have to have the lifestyle down pat first. And I mean, sure, is that 100% of the time? Am I saying that, like, if you've just had surgery and you've never exercised or ate right before, you can't make those changes going forward? No, of course not. You absolutely can. But if you're out there and you're like, I've thought about it and maybe I might, and I would highly recommend, because this was hard enough for me coming from a place of already having been in the gym and already having lost a lot on my own, already having my mindset right about, balancing the eating and the working out and the, fitness and, super high protein and all the, I already had a good grasp on those things, and it was still really hard for me. So I can't imagine how difficult it would be for someone who didn't have any of that knowledge and who didn't already have a discipline around those things to just jump feet first into this. So yeah, I would highly recommend getting on some sort of, pre-bariatric surgery eating plan. It's all going to be very high protein. Protein first. That's what you're going to hear throughout the entire bariatric community. And then getting into the gym, even if it's just, a small amount of body movement, walking, anything is better than nothing. But if you can get those habits in place first, it's going to be a lot easier to go back to that. And if you go back to that after the surgery, it's going to be a lot easier to take the weight off in a healthy manner, and utilize it as a tool and not just as, as the thing about tools. And I like the analogy of it being a tool, is that if there's a tool in a toolbox somewhere, it doesn't do anything. It just lays there. You have to go pick it up and you have to use it and you have to make it do something. Okay. So when I say it's a tool, it's still work. You have to pick the tool up and use it. So if you're looking at it in that respect, then I think your chances of being successful with the surgery are a lot higher. If you're looking at it as a way for you to skate kind of out of the picture a little bit and let someone else fix it for you, or let it get fixed on its own, that's probably not going to be a very successful bariatric surgery journey. So yeah, I think putting the healthy habits in place first, making sure you find a surgical team that really works for you. If you want my personal recommendation, I did go through Journey Light Physicians. They're here in Cincinnati. Dr. Trace Curry, he was absolutely fantastic. I feel like their team is really good. They really take things seriously. I felt like I had excellent care, start to finish and still ongoing. And, probably finding someone else going through it, finding some support groups. I think you approach it like you approach anything else. You have to make a plan. You've got to look at all of your options. You pick the right one for you. You make sure that you have the right mindset going into it. And then you execute it. and then you follow through all the way. You don't just stop halfway through, or you don't decide it's too hard. You just continue forward.
All right, folks, that's all we have time for this week. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please be sure to like us so that we can beat the algorithm. If you have any comments, please put them in the comments section. And if you would like to ask Mimi a question directly, feel free to reach out to her on Facebook.